Everyone knows how Real Madrid won the first 5 European Cups, marking the beginning of a historical continental legacy which only they have ever managed to achieve. However, in 1962, you wouldn't have been crazy to assume that Benfica would follow suit and have their own tantalising run in the competition. They had just come off the back of 2 European Cups in a row where they had defeated Barcelona and, funnily enough, Real Madrid in the finals. It seemed as though there was a new giant in town, and almost as if Los Blancos had passed the torch to the Eagles. But whilst Madrid broke their duck a few years later in 1966, and of course went on to win 9 more installments, Benfica wouldn't. In fact, not only have they not won a Champions League since 1962, they've also not managed to triumph in the Europa League either. And it's not like Benfica suddenly became mediocre. They still hold the record for most Portuguese domestic titles, and they have also managed to reach 5 European Cup finals since their triumph over Madrid, as well as 3 Europa League finals. For good measure. That's 8 European finals in the last half a century and 0 victories. This horrendous record in finals from a club which was once feared on the biggest stage of European football is so unbelievable that there can only be one explanation: the curse of Bela Guttmann. Bela Guttmann was born on the 27th of January 1899 in Budapest, which was then in Austria-Hungary, into a Jewish family. Football quickly became his life from an early age, as he played for various clubs and even represented Hungary at the 1924 Olympic Games. However, only a couple decades later, he'd be captured by the Nazis and taken to a concentration camp due to his Jewish heritage, where he was forced to endure relentless slave labour and torture. Despite this, he fortunately managed to survive the Holocaust. Now, after going through what he did for so long, it would have been forgiven if Guttmann had taken a long hiatus before returning to his normal everyday life. However, a break wasn't part of his plans, and in 1945, the same year that the Nazis were defeated in, Bela Guttmann became manager of the Budapest-based Vasas Sports Club. His managing career would be tumultuous to say the least, as he bounced around 12 clubs before landing at the Portuguese capital in 1959. The season prior to his appointment, the club had lost out on the Portuguese title by 1 goal on goal difference to rivals Porto, a Porto team which, funnily enough, was coached by Mr. Guttmann himself. The Eagles hadn't had much success in Europe prior to the hiring either. They'd only qualified for the European Cup once in the 50s, where they were eliminated in the preliminary round. But in his first campaign in charge, success was immediate. Benfica were crowned champions of Portugal for the 10th time, with only 1 loss in their campaign. This of course meant that they would qualify for the European Cup for the following season. But their expectations for the tournament weren't high, as everyone expected Real Madrid to win it, as no one had managed to stop them until then. But soon, a new favourite would arise, that being Madrid's rivals Barcelona, as they defeated Los Blancos in the first round of the competition. Both Benfica and Barcelona would sweep past the rest of their competition until they met in the final, with 26,000 in attendance witnessing what would be Benfica's first ever European Cup, with a 3-2 triumph over their opponents. This victory, paired with another league title, set Guttmann's Benfica up as favourites to repeat the same feat next season. But this time, something was different. Just the previous year, the club had signed a promising young talent from a local club. His name was Eusebio, and due to his age, he could only join the club in the summer of 1961. Little did they know at the time how monumental this 19-year-old would be for the club. But it wouldn't take them long to find out, as Benfica did in fact win back-to-back European Cups, with Eusebio scoring 5 goals throughout the tournament, including a brace in the final, which sealed a 5-3 victory against Real Madrid. Everything was falling into place perfectly for Benfica to replace Madrid as the European powerhouse of football for the following years to come. They had a great squad, great form, a teenage Eusebio who had the potential to become the greatest, but most importantly, they had a manager who knew how to win. But unfortunately, this is where things would begin to go horribly wrong. Mr. Guttmann knew he was a winner, and he had now proven it on the biggest stage. So shortly after the win against Madrid, he requested a pay rise, which would be rejected by the board. This made him furious beyond description. He couldn't believe it. After everything he'd done for the club, and this was how they were going to treat him, he was gone. But as he stormed out, he notoriously muttered, "Not in 100 years from now will Benfica ever be champions of Europe again." Mr. Guttmann probably didn't think much of it at the time, and neither did anyone else, as even the man himself stated in a following interview, "Benfica at this moment are well served and do not need me. They will be champions of Europe again." And he wouldn't be completely wrong, as Benfica managed to reach 3 more European Cup finals before the end of the 60s, in 1963, 65 and 68. However, they didn't come out on top a single time. In 63, they lost to Milan 2-1. In 65, which was the year that Eusebio won the Ballon d'Or, they were defeated by Inter Milan, this time 1-0. And in 68, they held on until extra time against Manchester United, only to concede 3 and lose by 4-1. But look, we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Sure, losing 3 finals out of 3 is unfortunate, but we can't forget that they just won 2 in a row that same decade. Benfica would surely be back in the final soon enough to end their bad run. Right? Wrong. They only reached the semi-finals once during the 70s. This was then followed by a rough first half of the 80s, as they only reached the quarter-final once in the first 5 years of the decade. They didn't even qualify for the competition in 85-86 or 86-87. However, in 87-88, they went on a run. This Benfica team was so good defensively that they only conceded 1 goal across the whole knockout stage. And in the final against PSV, their defence would stand firm against the Dutch, as they kept a clean sheet. The only problem was that they themselves couldn't infiltrate their opponents, so the game was sent to penalties. It had now been almost 3 decades since their last title and exactly 2 decades since their last appearance in the final. It was a whole new generation of players, as Eusebio and the rest had all retired by this point. Bela Guttmann himself had actually passed away 7 years prior in 1981. There was nothing holding the Eagles back this time, except for themselves. And hold themselves back they did, as they lost the penalty shootout in sudden death. Now is when fans really started to wonder if Benfica would ever be a European giant again. And considering how long it had taken them to reach the final again, you could have been right to wonder if you'd ever get the answer to that question. But in their surprising fashion, the club reached the final yet again, 2 years later in 1990, where they yet again had gone on an impressive run, this time more so for their offensive capabilities. Beating Derry City 6-1 and Budapest Honved 9-0 on aggregate would have certainly given them the confidence in front of goal against AC Milan in the final. Everyone around Benfica knew that they might not get another chance like this in a long time. This one was crucial. So much so that the great Eusebio even reportedly took a visit to Guttmann's grave to pray and beg for an end to the curse. All to no avail, as Benfica would lose 1-0, a 5th final defeat out of their last 5 finals. And to this day, they are yet to reach the final again. On top of that, since the curse, Benfica have lost 3 Europa League finals to Anderlecht, Chelsea and Sevilla, with the last 2 occurring in the 2010s. It's such an unfortunate run of form in specifically European finals that add validity to the curse. However, that's not where the story ends, as some argue that the curse has actually been broken. You see, Benfica's youth team defeated Salzburg 6-0 in the UEFA Youth Cup final in 2022. Of course, this came after 3 losses in their previous 3 finals in the competition, but they did win, and that is all that matters. However, as it was won by the youth team and it wasn't a senior achievement, can it really count as breaking the curse? Well, I'll leave that up to you, but I guess the only way of finding out is if Benfica win their next senior European final. Bela Guttmann's curse has also received various controversies, as many state that it's simply a myth. David Bolcheva wrote in his biography of Guttmann that there is no documented evidence of the man saying anything related to a curse. In fact, David claims that such a curse was first mentioned in May 1988, 7 years after his death, by newspaper Gazeta dos Desportos, conveniently on the day of Benfica's European Cup final loss. So whether you think that the curse is real or if it's just a myth, invented as an excuse for Benfica's poor performances on the biggest stages, you let us know in the comments. However, there is one question which is yet to have been answered. Will we ever see Benfica win a European title again?